In the previous video, in part 1, we talked about the first line of defense and its role in your immune system. So to illustrate that again, just to refresh your memory, pretend you are a soldier and you are in an army. You are protecting your city inside here from the enemies outside this wall, on the other side of this wall. These enemies need to cross this wall and evade these soldiers on top of the wall before they can actually enter into your city. By the time by which they enter your city, the soldiers inside these walls can hopefully fight them and eliminate them. The first line of defense that we saw last time is this wall. This wall represents your skin. Any pathogens, any small enemies that you have that you can't see floating around needs to pass your skin and these soldiers on top of them. And these soldiers represent the secretions, the mucus on your skin, which hopefully can kill the pathogens. Now that's where we stopped. We stopped with the skin. What if your skin gets damaged? So for example, what if one of these enemies can shoot or throw a bomb that breaks a part of this wall, such as this? So let's pretend now these guys can see there's a hole in the wall. Let's pretend these guys can sneak through. They just snuck through this hole. Now they can get into your body, right? They can get into the land which you are trying to defend. So what we're talking about today is how your body manages this situation. What happens when your skin gets broken? What happens if there's a hole in your skin? You have a cut, a bruise, anything that opens your skin, allowing the outside world, so all these little pathogens flying around right next to you right now, what prevents them? What does your body do to prevent them from coming in and prevent blood from leaving? Because when you damage your skin, you're bleeding, right? And you want to prevent blood from continuously leaving, because if you lose too much blood, then serious issues can occur, right? So that's what we're talking about today. So this is the process of blood clotting. Blood, we all know what blood is. It's very important and it carries all the nutrients of our body and etc. There's many functions. Clotting means to put it together, to make them stick together. By making your blood stick together, it gets thicker, which means it can't leave anymore. It's not so liquid. So at the site of your injury where you got a cut, you'll notice the blood gets hard, right? That is blood clotting. And this is important because if at that zone where it gets hard, that prevents other blood from leaving and also prevents things from coming in because it's nice and solid. So let's go to the real image. So this is just an analogy. Let's go to the real image. So here we go. Again, this represents the outside, just like this image here. Outside, so these are the enemies, or the enemies are trying to defend. That represents the pathogens here, the bacteria, for example, right here. The skin right here is represented by the wall. For the sake of this video, we're ignoring the little men on top. In the previous video, I talked about that. That would just be mucus on the skin, but don't worry about that for now. That's not the purpose. And then the inside here is the cells inside your blood. This is the location, the blood, is where these things are trying to get to, right? Now, like I said, let's say for some reason you get injured. You fall off a bridge, you try and cut a piece of avocado and you chop your finger, whatever you're gonna do. Let's say you accidentally cut away a piece of skin. Now you're bleeding. Blood is going to leave, right, into the outside world. And this means any pathogens outside that are small enough can enter that site, okay? And, okay, so you're bleeding and any pathogens can enter. You want to avoid this. This is blood clotting. So what exactly happens? It's actually quite interesting. It's quite simple. So just pay attention. It will make sense. But first, before I confuse you even more, I want to introduce who these guys exactly are, all these guys here, so you're clear on what's going on and what I'm talking about. So this is our character list. This is the stuff involved, okay? If you understand who these guys are, you'll understand the whole process really easily. Let's first start with what we can see here. We know this is bacteria. This is a pathogen. A pathogen is anything trying to get into your body to harm you, okay? That's all that this one is. What is this one right here? This is a red blood cell. It's also called an erythrocyte, the science name. Erythro means red, cyte means cell, so it's a red blood cell. Its only job is to carry oxygen and carbon dioxide around your blood. That's its only job. What is this one right here? This is a white blood cell. Don't worry too much about this one. This one we'll talk about in the next video. Just know that it's there. This one right here is called a platelet. Platelet. This one has a very important role in blood clotting, so we'll get to that. These two right here are proteins. And this sign, so I put this sign on them, this restriction sign. When I put this sign on anything, it means that this particular thing is inactivated, which means it's there, but it's not working. It's not activated yet, okay? That's all it means. But when I remove it, it means it's activated, meaning it can work. It's like putting handcuffs on someone. So for example, this can represent handcuffs. If you have handcuffs on you, you're kind of inactivated. You can't work properly. But if you take them off, then you're activated. You can work. Okay, so let's see. The skin is broken. Right now, blood is probably leaving and pathogens are probably coming in. What does your body do in order to prevent more blood from leaving and prevent pathogens from coming in? So what happens is these platelets are super, super, super important. They're basically flowing around in the blood, right? The blood moves continuously throughout your body. That's why when you can feel your pulse, you can feel waves of blood flowing. As the blood flows, the cells inside it also flows, okay? So basically, plasma is the liquid part of blood. So when you hear the word plasma, think of basically blood, but only the liquid part of it. For example, the solid part are the cells. So the cells are not the plasma, but the cells are dissolved inside the plasma. Okay, that's why the plasma appears red sometimes. So the blood you see, it appears red because of red blood cells. But plasma itself is pretty much just water. Okay, so plasma is everything in blood that is liquid. So not cells or anything like that, just water, the liquid part of blood. And anyway, so these flow in the plasma, they're dissolved in the plasma, and they swim around, and their job is to check for any injuries. So eventually, as this blood flows around, and all the cells keep flowing, and all the things, they keep flowing, eventually, the platelet might notice, oh, there's a hole here. And as soon as that happens, something very important happens. So it notices there's an injury, but it can't really tell anyone, and it doesn't, so how does it do it? It has to tell somebody. It doesn't have a mouth, so how does it tell the rest of the cells that something is wrong? What it does is, since cells can't speak, they release little messages. These messages are called clotting factors, and I represent them as a sun, kind of like this. Okay, so you can pretend these clotting factors are inside the platelets, and they kind of like shoot them out. Okay, releasing many of them. Okay, so you can pretend there's millions, and all of them. So even this one would release it. So but what would happen is this. So since it's noticing there's an injury, it immediately releases these clotting factors. These clotting factors have various roles. One of them are to basically, as they fly away, as they're being ejected and released, they stick to other platelets, and they bring these other platelets here to the site of the problem. For example, if the injury is right here, you don't want the platelets to come here. You want them all to come there, right? So these clotting factors they behave as a message to call all the platelets to the site of the problem, okay? In addition, they are kind of like adhering factors. So adhering means to stick to something. So when they bind to these cells, they cause them to slow down and stop at the site of infection because blood is continuously flowing, right? So even if this cell knows it has to come here, it can't just stop here because blood is continuously flowing. It doesn't have hands, right? How does it grab onto the wall? Well, this is kind of like glue. So these platelets not only call these cells to come to the site of infection, but they are like glue. So they kind of cause them to stick at the site of infection, like this. Like this. So they come and they're like, ooh, stick. And then another one will come. And as it flows, oh, stick. Oh, stick. So after a while, there will be a lot of platelets at the site of the wound, at the site of where the skin was damaged. Now, what's next? So that's the first part. Platelets notice, one platelet will notice there's an injury. It will release a lot of clotting factors. These clotting factors will attract other platelets to the site and cause them to stay there by adhering to them, and so that the platelets then stick to the site of infection. Okay, this is important because you don't want other sites to be clogged with platelets, only the site that is the problem. Now, the platelets are not enough to make a clot. Something else is needed. So what it happens is these platelets, these clotting factors has one last role. So other than calling all these platelets to come here and stick and release their own clotting factors, now you'll have many, because now you have many platelets here. And if there's many platelets and many platelets are releasing clotting factors, you can imagine there's going to be millions and billions of these clotting factors. And their final role is to activate something called prothrombin. That's this molecule right here. When this molecule right here has this sign on it, it is inactive. The inactive form of thrombin is prothrombin. So this molecule is thrombin. When it's inactivated, it is called prothrombin. And that makes sense because pro means before or prior to thrombin. So prior to thrombin, so it's not yet thrombin, it's inactivated. When it's activated, this thing will be off and it will be called thrombin. But these clotting factors can come and stick to prothrombin, so prothrombin is the inactivated one, and cause it to become activated. Okay, so these clotting factors activate prothrombin. Once prothrombin has been activated to thrombin, it can travel around the blood. So it will travel around the blood, and eventually it will meet another protein that is inactivated called fibrinogen. Okay, fibrinogen. You can see it's inactivated. But when thrombin, which is now activated, comes into contact with it, it will activate fibrinogen, turning it into fibrin. Okay? You see, it's like a sequence of events. Now, fibrin is unique because when it's inactivated, so when it's called fibrinogen, it is water soluble, and we know the blood is mainly water, which means that in this inactivated state, it likes to be dissolved in the blood, so it freely stays in the blood, meaning it likes to stay in there and flow around in the middle. It doesn't really want to go anywhere else. It likes to be in the blood. But when it's inactivated by thrombin, it is now insoluble. It is insoluble, meaning it does not want to stay in water. It is not soluble. This means it's going to try and escape the water. And so the first thing it does is it travels to the only side where there's no water, which is the wound that is exposed to the outside environment, which is without water. So since it's insoluble, it's going to try and go to the top. It's kind of like oil in water. If you've ever tried to dissolve water in water, that's easy. It mixes pretty well. But if you ever tried to dissolve oil, which is insoluble, just like this fibrin, it travels to the top, right? It doesn't want to mix with the water. That's the same thing here. So as soon as it's activated and becomes insoluble, it travels to the top to the area of the wound where there's air, there's no water, where it can be freely stable. Now, if this continues to happen, and think about it, so many thrombin molecules are activated from prothrombin molecules, and then all of these thrombin molecules activate many more fibrinogen molecules into fibrin, and they all travel to this site of infection. Then we have a meshwork, and we call this a fibrin mesh or a clot. Okay, so it's kind of covering up the site that was cut. And this is useful. So this is basically the thing that you see. And also, first, these platelets can kind of, as they travel along, they can get stuck in this fibrin meshwork. So they can kind of also contribute to this mesh, this fibrin mesh, and get stuck in it. Okay? So this right here, what you're seeing, is what you see after you wound that you have, like for example, you cut your hand. This is what you're seeing when it's starting to dry up. It's the wound, it's the scab that is forming, okay? And you notice that as soon as that happens, no more blood is flowing out, right? And that's perfect. It's all dried up. No more blood can flow out. Pathogens can't get in. And that's what we want. We don't want to. This is exactly what we want. Now, from here, It will take a bit of time to heal and re-heal the skin and all that. But right now, this is all what blood clotting really is. You close the hole that was formed. That's all that blood clotting is. Okay, so you can see that all of these guys were involved. We did not yet talk about the leukocytes and not really about the pathogens, because the purpose of this video was just to talk about closing this hole, blood clotting. In the next video, we'll talk about what happens to the pathogens, because the whole purpose of the skin is to keep pathogens out, right? But if pathogens are now able to get in, so say one got in before your skin managed to close it, before your skin managed to form this clot, how does your body deal with this enemy that just got in? So that's what we're talking about next time, okay? That's where your white blood cells are going to come in, the leukocytes. Okay, lastly, just want to show you a picture of what a blood clot looks like, because this is not exactly really how it looks like in real life. So let me show you. Here we got it. So you can see here, all these red things, this is the red blood cells that I was saying, get stuck in these fibers, these fibrin molecules, fibrin proteins. And these little white or whatever color, these long pipes things, that's fibrin. That's this green thing I'm showing here. So you can see at a site of problem, all these fibrins will be formed and blood cells will happen to get stuck in them. And that's what you're seeing when your wound is healing. This is exactly what you're seeing. Red blood cells and some fibrin molecules preventing blood from leaving. Okay, that's the whole process. So I have a small summary, just overall, if you'd like to look at it, and I'll quickly explain it. But if you get the process, this is good enough for you. So let's look at it. So here we start. Your skin gets injured through some sort of injury. This causes your platelets, which are these little things here, to release a lot of clotting factors. These clotting factors have many roles, including to attract the more platelets to the site of infections, and this means even more clotting factors are released, and they also cause the platelets to stick to the site of the problem, the site of damage, and their last role is to activate something called a protein called prothrombin, so this one, into thrombin, which is basically the same thing, just activated. And then this thrombin will activate fibrinogen, which is this one, into fibrin. And fibrin, unlike fibrinogen, is insoluble in water, which means it will travel to the surface where where air is exposed, where the blood is exposed to air. So this basically, the fibrin is essentially trying to leave the blood because it is insoluble. And in doing so, it forms a clot where some small red blood cells could get stuck in it. And this is what you see when you see a scab on your arm. And that is all you need to know, all the details you need to know about blood clotting. So in the next video, I mentioned before, we'll talk about what happens when that pathogen actually managed to get in, even though the blood clot formed.